One of the nice things about Octave, as far as them being a reseller, is you know, it seems like they have a bit more freedom to sort of carry products. Like, for example, Affinia, you know, they have their distributors to, or their suppliers to sort of worry about. You know, they don't want to make PP3DP upset, so it does sort of limit what they can do. Like, they're not going to offer a temperature switch for obvious reasons. One of the things that's nice about Octave is, since they don't necessarily target only Affinia users, but you know, general 3D printer users as well, that they have some nice little products that they're coming out with. I showed earlier, you know, they've got Garolite plates, borosilicate plates, but they're, you know, they're kind of expanding in these relatively low-cost accessories, you know, that are useful. So one of the first ones I got was this little toolkit. These are basically kind of like small wood chisels, fairly thick blades as far as like the material. You know, it's not thin like an X-Acto knife. There's some rounded ones, rounded edges. There's an angled one. And why I think these are more useful than just using an X-Acto knife is, a lot of times when you're trying to separate support material, you're not really trying to cut the support material off, more as you're trying to wedge it or pry it to basically aid it in separating along its sort of natural separation line. A lot of times if you'll have support material on a part and you're trying to use an X-Acto and dig it off, you end up just sort of cutting a layer of it off and leaving some of the support material on it. So that's why I think it's beneficial to use you know, more of a prying tool like this, where you can just get in there and kind of wiggle it and basically use it as a prying tool. Whereas if you try doing that with an X-Acto, you would end up, you know, breaking the blade, or, you know, it's just not really their intended use. Definitely with PLA, it becomes a lot more useful. Support material with PLA is, at least I've found, fairly difficult. So you have to, you know, it's sort of, if you've ever seen like cocktail swords, you know, it's that real brittle plastic. At least the clear PLA is a lot like that. So removing support material, you want something that you can sort of carve off the support material. Whereas if you had a thin blade like an X-Acto, you're probably just going to end up hurting yourself. So also too, one thing for Affinia, since the Affinia doesn't really do bridging, when you print out a lot of 3D models that are designed to be printed on a RepRap style printer, you end up with sort of support material that's sort of in recessed areas, and it's sort of difficult to remove. And so that's why these curved ones actually come in really handy. Like, you can put it down in a hole and you can start, you can basically rock it back and forth and get under that support material and sort of pop out support material plugs, which is, you know, it's not something you'd be able to do with an X-Acto. Another thing that I think everyone should have, even if they're not doing 3D printing, is a digital caliper. These are actually pretty standard digital calipers. You can see I have some here that I've already, you know, that I've had in the past for when I use my modeling programs. And you can kind of see side by side, it's pretty much identical to the one I was using. These are actually useful for a number of reasons. They're useful in, like, if you have a part that you're trying to replicate, you'll want to get, you know, accurate measurements. One of the things that I suggest you also look into, I think SparkFun was originally where I saw this modification. These batteries don't last incredibly long, and my understanding is that digital calipers, at least these sort of lower end ones, don't ever really fully turn off. So these batteries will run down. So what I did is I just used a single AA holder, double stick tape it on the back, and then soldered it into these battery connections. I mean, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can just buy extra of these batteries. But you know, it's pretty useful. One thing that's also useful in the Affinia is when you're printing out the calibration pieces, you really need to be able to accurately measure from corner to corner, and the piece height. It's like the 40mm piece height that you have to measure, and that's important for getting a well-calibrated machine. And that's sort of, if you can't print out parts, if you're printing out mechanical parts and you can't print them out on a calibrated machine, it can be frustrating. So, like even this is from a standard RipRap machine. Well, let me zero it back out here. This is supposed to be a 20mm test cube, and I can kind of see here, I'm pretty close. Do it on the other side. So on a RipRap machine, this would sort of aid you in maybe your, making sure your XY steps were correct, things like that. So, a couple things that if you're not familiar with digital calipers, you can use this end to measure the outside dimensions of pieces. You can use this side to measure the inside diameter of pieces, and you can use this bottom piece here is to measure a depth of a hole, or so for example, there's this little cutout for the battery here. I can put this there, push it down, and I can sort of get the measurement for that depth. So I think even if you're not into 3D printing, digital calipers, I mean, they've become so cheap. These little digital calipers are quite a bit easier to use than the standard analog ones. I recommend that everybody pick one up. Pick one of these up. If you're doing support, if you're removing support material a bit, if you're going to print with PLA, I definitely recommend the cutting tools. So, and I think they do have a couple more other toolkits that they're coming out with, so it'll be interesting to see. And they are relatively expensive. I think it's like $15 for one of the toolkits. So, throw it in with another order, save some shipping. If you have any questions, let me know.